Hey, everybody. I got asked a really interesting question. I was at a convention. I was one of the speakers for about 2.5 hours. And as I was packing up, somebody said, have you ever heard the terminology prepping an image? What in the heck is that? Are we ready to talk about it? Let's do it. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new to the channel, this is dedicated to photography and working as a photo artist, pushing ourselves creatively out of the box to think differently. All right, let's jump into the program. I had a very interesting question when I got done speaking at a convention here in Michigan, and that was, have you ever heard of the terminology prepping an image? I mean, what in the heck does that mean? Well, it means slightly different things to different photographers based on, what you photograph. So an example, prepping an image to a portrait photographer, they tend to do this a lot. Before they go into maybe cropping the image and making any other adjustments in color grading, the first thing they do is to get rid of any kind of distraction in the image. So maybe there's like some lint that you didn't remove or something like that, but it's showing up in the image. So you want to remove the lint or any kind of dust, that kind of stuff. If you're a landscape photographer and there's some people in the background, you want to get rid of those people. Well, you're prepping the image to get rid of those people first before you start applying any color grading, maybe cropping the image, adding some saturation or desaturation of your image. It just, again, we're prepping that first. So I'm going to show you some examples here. I'm actually going to demo something that I'm working on a project as a compositor, which I know not everybody's a compositor, but I need to emphasize is that prepping an image is very popular before you move in, no matter what kind of photography that you do. So again, if it might be product photography, portrait photography, landscape photography. So let's jump and dive into Photoshop right here. If you didn't see my images a few weeks ago on this, I call it the human vaporizing tool, which is just a nickname I gave it, but I need to remove these people out of this landscape shot. And if you've been following me, you know that I am not a landscape photographer. So I was out in Moab with my daughter, and I just saw this really cool, shot right here, the S pathway going into the landscape there where the rock formations are at. But there's always people walking by. There's like bus loads and stuff that are being emptied. And so I need to get rid of those people. So I removed that. So that's called prepping an image. So now I can get into this and say, okay, I'm going to recrop this. I'm going to add some saturation or maybe desaturated, color grade, whatever it is you're doing. But the first thing I need to do is get rid of that. And that's all the distraction. Okay, so that's what prepping an image would mean. Okay, so let's take a look at an example here that I'm working on. This right here is, I'm not finished with this yet. I got some minor tweaking to do, but it's based on a couple images. This background image right here, and this is the subject. And I put together a composite. But notice what I did. Let me scroll down here, and I'm going to, again, demo how I prep this. This is the background, the original background right there. This right here, this layer, let me turn it on and off so you can see, this is the prepped background before I got into do anything else. So let me start here real fast to show you. Here's the basic background. I prepped the background first. And then after that, I was adding the different elements to my composite. Let's just fill them all in there. And again, I'm still working on this. In fact, I think that's too strong, so I'm going to pull the opacity down on my signature a little bit so it doesn't stand out as much. But again, prepping the image. Okay, so let's walk through the example here. So I'm going to go to the background here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So Control-J, Command-J on a Mac, so I can quickly do a before and after for you. I'm going to go over here, and I'll talk about why I'm doing this in a minute, but right mouse click, and I'm going to choose Convert Smart Object. And then I'm going to go in and make some adjustments. Now, if you're not familiar with smart objects, I want to share a little gotcha and a little trick in working with smart objects. Number one, with a smart object layer like this, if I double click on this and it just opens up the image, and I decide that I'm going to add, and I'm just going to goof around here, let's go with, I don't know, the brightness and contrast. Actually, let's go to vibrance. And I'm going to nuke this. I'm just going to take saturation. I'm going to push that way up so we can see that there are some changes. Then when I close out of this, and let me, I don't need this image here anymore, so let me get rid of that. And so when I close out of this, yes, I'm going to save that. And now that is within my Smart Object layer. So here's the gotcha. If I do this, Control J or Command J on a Mac to duplicate the Smart Object layer, and I double click on this again, and I change my mind on this. Maybe I'm going to do a blending technique. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the saturation back and make it black and white. And then I'm going to close out of this. Do I want to update this? Yes. Uh-oh, something weird happened. And that is, well, it's not weird, but this is just the rules of the game. Both layers here are black and white. I didn't want that. I wanted this one to be black and white and this one to be nuked, with the saturation. And maybe I want to do a blending mode between the two layers. Well, that's not going to work for me. So I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to delete that layer. And in fact, you know what? Let me just start all over. I'm going to delete that. So here's the way this works. If I do, again, Control J, and I do a right mouse click and I choose Convert to Smart Object, and then I want to do another Smart Object layer, but I want it to be independent of this one. So I can do any kind of changes I want. You don't want to do, copy paste or Control J, Command J on a Mac. What you want to do is go here, right mouse click, and choose, come all the way down here, New Smart Object via Copy. That's really important. So when I choose that, it makes a Smart Object layer, but here's the difference. If I double click on this now, and I decide, okay, let me go down here again, and let's just choose Vibrant, and let's just nuke it with the saturation. And then I close out of this, save this, yes. And notice it did not apply it to this one. So if I go to this one, double click, and I decide to say, okay, let's come down here to the vibrance, and I'm just goofing around here, making it black and white real fast. And then I'm done. You could see now I have the Smart Object layer that's black and white, and I have this one, so it is nuked. So if I want to get involved in, blending modes or whatever between the two Smart Object layers, I can now do that. So that's just a little bit of a gotcha right there. So I want to make sure that you understand that if you use Smart Object layers, be careful. If you need to duplicate it, be aware that you might want to do the method like this I just showed you, and that is New Smart Object via Copy. So they're independent of each other. Okay, so I'm just going to throw that in the garbage can. And let me show you what I did to prep this image. Okay, Control J again, and I'm just going to do a right mouse click again, and I'm going to choose Create a Smart Object. So let me come down here to Convert to Smart Object. And I'll explain why I'm going to do this in a few minutes. I'm going to pull up one of my, let's say, plugins that I really love using a lot, and that's Luminar Neo. So again, I'm prepping this image before I use this in my composite, because that's what we're supposed to be talking about. What is prepping? So I'm going to pull up that software. And this is, again, one of many reasons why I own Luminar Neo. And again, no affiliation with them. I've talked about this software in the past. I've used it in the past before. But a lot of times, to do certain things in Photoshop would be very difficult, or it's not so difficult, it's very time consuming. And time is money, and I want to get through things quickly and accurately as possible. So I'm going to go right to the edit mode here. And there's a feature that I really like in this program that I use quite often, and that is, if I scroll down here, and that is something called Magic Light. Now you're going to see that Magic Light right there. I'm going to click on that to open up the interface, and I'm going to zoom in here on this chandelier right here on the wall. And what I want to do is I want to add some really cool lighting effects. So if I move the intensity slider to the right, you can see what's happening. Now I'm going to overdo it so we can actually see this on the YouTube channel, because a lot of times subtle changes, when you send a video up there, they optimize and crunch down the video, and sometimes subtle changes don't show up. But the size right here, I can move this back and forth. You can see the size, the beam width, spread it out, bring it down in a bit. Again, that's all up to you based on your vision. The glow of this, pull that up or down, very subtle there. I like this one. I could pull back, watch what happens. It sort of blurs everything, but if I do this, look, it sharpens that right up, and that's called the clearness of the lights. The brightness, obviously that makes sense. I want to brighten it up versus pull it down. So I'll leave that right there. And number of beams, right now it's at 7. So if I can increase that, or I can decrease that, okay? And again, based on your vision of your work, I'm gonna leave it at 7 right there. Rotation, if you want to rotate that, that would be great. But is it perfect? And that is, well, no, it got all of these candles that I want, but it didn't get the chandelier, all of them over there. In fact, down here, let me scroll down here, it didn't even get these. So one of the features it has here is something called Add, and you can adjust the size of your brush. I'm just doing right bracket versus left bracket. And that's all I have to do is click right here where the flame is at, and it added that effect. So I'm just going to click on these. Now, very hard to do in Photoshop and very time consuming to do this in Photoshop. This is so much easier and faster. Look at the chandelier. I mean, come on. So I'm just hitting these spots where the candles are at. Actually, they're candle lights. They're not real candles with flames, but just do enough. I don't have to hit every single one because it sort of blends in. Down here, missing that, and I think that's a reflection there, so I'm going to leave that alone. But if we pull back on this to see the image, this is the before, after, and that's an example of me prepping the image. Now I'm going to choose apply, and I did this purposely, and that is once this renders out, I go, oh shoot, I needed to blur the background. Well, I know I can blur the background in Photoshop, okay? But Luminar Neo could do it, and since I was in Luminar Neo, it probably would have saved me time and eliminate extra steps. So let me go back here where it says Luminar Neo on the Smart Object layer, double click, and what that will do is reopen this up, and all my settings are intact. So it takes just a while for that to open up. And then I'm going to add a blur. Now, normally I would have done it. I just purposely pretended I forgot to do that. But under the Edit button again, so I'm just going to choose that. And down here is, let's see, blur. So I'm going to choose that feature, and I like the Gaussian blur just like it is in Photoshop, so I'm going to make sure that's selected, and I can play with how much blur I would like to apply. And again, if I felt I over-blurred it because it's a Smart Object layer, I can always come back and unblur the blur. That's the importance of working with a Smart Object layer. So I'm going to leave that, say about right there. And there's my before, and after. And then click on Apply here at the very top, and it'll just re-render the image back into Photoshop, updated with the settings. So there's before, after. Hey, by the way, if you're learning anything, if you can do me a favor, and that is like the video, subscribe if you have not subscribed, hit that notification bell next time I upload a video, which is about once a week. You'll get notified on that. Okay, so this is just an example of me prepping an image to get that background ready as I go into building my composite. And that's all that prepping an image means, okay? So again, if you're a landscape photographer, you want to eliminate those people before you go into color grading and doing other things, adjusting your exposure, you're prepping that image first by removing those people and then continue on with your project. Same thing like portrait photography. Oh, I thought I brushed off all the loose hairs on the person's, blouse or their shirt, but yet it's there and it's going to show up on the image. So I need to remove that with the remove tool in Photoshop. So that's called prepping, again, an image. All right, so hopefully you learned something. And again, let's get that camera out and practice. Until next time, see ya.